Hi, my name is Ryan Carney, and I'm going to be going over GUIs in Java. So, in order to do so, I'm actually going to use some of our lab that we just did, and basically, when you are in Java, there's going to be a thing, or you're using GUIs in Java, there's going to be a thing that is very common called a widget, and basically, that's going to be any visible part of your GUI. And when I explain this, I probably didn't do that the best way, but let's just run our gone fishing view. And as you can see here, when I run this fully, there's a bunch of stuff. So there's a bunch of buttons right here. You can click them, they're interactive. There's a slider, there's also this label, and also this label as well. So basically, any widget is going to be something like this. So there's buttons, lists, sliders, any that type of thing where you really are customizing your window. And if I want to change the font of one of these, it's actually very simple. So I'll go down to, let's just say these buttons. So basically, when I made this whole entire grid right here, I have an array that's filled with fishing buttons, which is an extension or it's a subclass of the J button class, which is the main class for just using a button in Java. Uh, and then so you're gonna make it object of a J button if you want to just make a basic button in Java. So when I made this button, I wanted to change the font so it was italicized and it was in Times New Roman. And basically, you all you do is set font on your button. So we have our button set font, and we're gonna make a font object as the constructor for set font or as an argument for the set font method. And we're going to have a string which contains the font name. And there's a bunch of ones that Java already recognizes, and you can find them anywhere online. And that's going to be our first parameter argument. And then we're going to have our second one is part of is a field of the font class. So right now I have italic, but if we just go through it, there's a bunch of other fields. There's plain, which will just have the normal plain style of font. There's bold. There's a bunch of other things that you can do. And this is basically just another way to customize your font. So let's go back to the italic. And then the third argument is just the font size. So I set it as 15. I just thought it looked good in this, and it kind of made it just look very organized. But yeah, that's how you're going to customize a widget by setting a font. Now, as you can see, these buttons here are all interactive. They all do something. We can see the sliders are updated and it's displaying fish or no fish every time I click. So if I exit out of this real quick, in order to have an interactive button, you are going to have a event handling class. So right here, we have our fishing button listener, and this implements action listener. So pretty much for a button, when we're implementing the action listener, which is just a interface, and we want to have something interactive, we have to have this method action performed, and we have the action event E. So if there's an action, which in our case is just a click of a button, then this code uh, be performed. So you have to have a try catch structure in the action performed because it does have the capability to throw an exception. So we have our try catch structure, and basically for this one, I just said if there's a fish at I'm not going to go too deep into it. Basically, if there's a fish at the button location, then it will set the text to fish, and if there isn't, then it'll set the text to no fish. So that's how you can kind of just make it a little bit interactive. And as you can see, when I run it again, every time I click, every time I click a button, there are other things other than the button that are updated. So every time I click fish, let me find one of these. Every time I click fish, then this slider goes down by one. And every time I click anything, this slider goes down by one, which are tries remaining. And this is done by updating our user interface every time the button is clicked. So as you can see, I have our view dot update UI. So I'm just updating the user interface. And that is going to be part of our view, our gone fishing view class. So we're going to have our public void update UI. And basically all I did here was, since this is called every time I click a button, I want the slider to represent the value of what it actually is in our model. So I'm not going to show the code for the model, but pretty much every time that the button is clicked, it calls this method, and the tries remaining slider, it has a method called set value, and it's called, and it sets the value to our fishing model, and then it get tries remaining. So it updates to the actual amount of tries remaining stored in our model every time we click the button, because this method is called. And then if the program recognizes that the fish win, which basically means there's no tries remaining, then it'll show a message. It will show a message using the J option pane dot show message dialog, which will just have a pop-up message, and then it'll close the window using this dispose statement. And then if a player wins, which means there's no fish left, then it'll do the same thing, but print a player win message, and then it'll dispose of the window as well. So if I just run this again, go through everything, just try to click as fast as I can. Hopefully I win. I'm getting a lot of fish here. Okay, so I was actually very close to winning, but since I didn't win, I ran out of tries before all the fish were gone. This message popped up, game over, fish win, and I press OK, and then the whole window closes. So that's how you would actually have a the state of the widget change based off of the click of a button or the triggering of one event. You have to would kind of use this update UI method just in order to update the whole user interface every time a button is clicked, because it can interfere with other parts of the user interface. So I also wanted to go over the layout managers in Java, or yeah. So when we're doing when you're using our GUIs. So for this one, I used a border layout, but I actually made another class just to kind of show the different types of layouts. So like I said, there's a border layout. So if I run this code, our GUI example view, then uh, it'll have this border layout. So basically in a border layout, there's 5 different locations that you can use. There's north, south, east, center, and west. So as we can see here, I said button 1 is north, button 2 is south, button 3 is east, button 4 is center, and button 5 is west. And it correlates perfectly with our code right here. And then also you can see this hello one button, or the button 1 is blue. This is because I used the set background method. And this is what you're going to use when you want to change the color of any widget that you have in Java. So if I want to just set the background to blue, I could also, if I just close this real quick, if I wanted to change it, I could also change it. Why did I run it? I could change it to red, and then we save. And then look, it's red now. So this is how you're going to change the color of a widget in Java. Now we have this border layout, which is perfect, but there is also other types of layouts. So we're not using this border layout, so we don't really need to use this border layout text. So I am just going to add these buttons, and then we're going to do it in the form of a grid layout. So a grid layout is basically just going to take up the entire panel that is assigned to. So these are all layout managers, and it will take up the entire panel. And since this is the only panel in our JFrame, it's going to take up the entire screen no matter what we do. So when I run this again, as you can see, our hello one button is still red, but it is a 2x3 grid. And this is because in our constructor for a grid layout, it's going to have 2 arguments. One is the number of rows, and the second one is the number of columns. So if I were to change this to, let's say, 3,2, then we should have 3 rows and 2 columns, which is exactly what we have here. This is a great grid layout. It'll take out whatever panel or frame it is added to, and obviously we added all of these to the panel, which is assigned with a grid layout. And then last one we have is a flow layout. And a flow layout is nice for if you don't have a particular size when you're thinking of your buttons or your frame. So right here, as you can see, we have our 6 buttons, and it's in this kind of 2 by 3 format. But a flow layout, what it does is it makes it so the buttons aren't binded to the positions that they're in. So when I move this, it'll change the shape of the, if you want to call it a grid. I know it's not a grid layout, but I'll just call it a grid of buttons. So right now it's 1 row, 6 columns. But if I make it really small, I can have 1 column with 6 rows. It'll adapt to the shape that you make it. And then obviously if it gets too small, it can't show everything. But for the most part, it tries to. And then one more thing with our just showing our grid layout and our border layout. If I open this up again, when we run this, the grid layout, it doesn't matter what the shape or the size is, it'll still show all 6 buttons. So even like this, it still tries to show all 6 buttons. So it's obviously a little different, and it keeps the same shape no matter what you do. And then the same thing with the border layout. If I open this up right now, let's see. If I do this, then it's going to keep that same structure no matter what the size is. It's not going to change. So that's all I have for GUIs in Java, or GUIs. I hope you guys enjoyed and learned something. I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.